Welcome back to the podcast, fam. Today's another one of those special episodes. It's one of those that I just felt in my heart after we recorded. And it's interesting because I had done this interview a few months back because I like to batch things so that I can stay ahead. And at the time that I recorded this, I wasn't yet as clear as I am now about not only what I want to talk about on the podcast and what my message is and how I can be the most helpful in my speech, but I also wasn't as clear about how to speak and like how to engage with people. Because I mentioned on Saw's episode that I've learned so much about human conversation and holding space and really seeing someone and speaking with them. Like, this has been a course for me in being a better steward of relationship and conversation. And I'm thinking back to this episode that you're about to hear, and I kind of like went in guns blazing at first, like, so tell us why factory farming is bad. And it's just so funny the way I went about it, because thankfully, Taylor Collins, our guest today, who's the co-founder of Force of Nature Meats, he is in that like good mind, that right mind, that different level of consciousness and nervous system calm, because, you know, he's a farmer and he's so connected to the land and connected to what really matters, that he was able to come in with his consciousness and almost bring me back to earth and steward in this really beautiful conversation that just took a turn to what it was meant to be. Sometimes what people have to give and where they take a conversation, if you just show that curiosity or hold that space, can be so unexpected. And it was really fun when he took the conversation to how we need to rewild, for example. He started talking about domesticated pigs and how when pigs escape from captivity, from farming and all of this, and they go back into the wild, they literally start to grow, I think, like tusks, and their tail starts to change within a few weeks, and literally just changing their environment and no longer being literally held captive to a fake system, right? Like, farming is technically a fake reality, fake system, rigid, doesn't necessarily follow nature's rules, doesn't give them space to roam and become what they need to be, right? My whole thing. And all of a sudden, when that happens, when these pigs are just given the right conditions, when they're given freedom and returned to their nature, returned to nature, period, they are able to transform and remember who they actually are. Remember that they're wild boar. And I just thought that was such an insane, relevant, stunning metaphor for us and for everything, because humans aren't the only important thing, but as a human, I try to bring it back to us so that we can learn. And yeah, what if we rewilded? What if we took away some of the even mental confinement of our sort of artificial world that we've created? The same way pigs living in a farming world and in captivity and in a pen, they mentally think that pen is the only thing. But as soon as they get outside, they realize the vastness of their nature and the world. And same for humans. Like, we've created these constructs of like how we need to act in society. This is how we do. We work from this time. This is time. Like, this is what matters. You know, like we just live in such an abstract world where like now it's like, I always use this Birkin bag example, that like a Birkin bag that's the same leather as another bag is worth $60,000 because of this strange, like abstract value system that we've placed upon things. When, you know, a regular leather bag that's actually handmade and has such a better energy or whatever, that's not as bad for the environment and all these things, can cost $20. And like, you just think about this world that we're living in and how much healthier we could be mentally, hormonally. Like, think about the growing of the tusks and the tail changing. What if our hair and our skin and our brains changed when we could just free ourselves from thinking that what we think is important is what's important, and just getting back to nature, getting back to each other, getting back to sitting by a stream and gathering with one another. Taylor just had so much wisdom for us in this episode. We talk a lot about the state of farming as a whole, factory farming as a whole, why it breaks nature's principles. What are nature's principles? He talks about this need to reconnect with the land and highlights this potential that regenerative farming has to feed the global population if we can do it the right way, and how there needs to be this systemic change. And I felt so inspired listening to him speak. He also talked about the importance of animal agriculture, even if it's regenerative. And again, the animals are more free versus confined. He talked about the importance of bison or animals in general walking the same land where plants are farmed, because the bison actually, with their, I guess, hooves or feet or whatever they got, they are kind of digging into the soil and disturbing the soil just enough so that the soil can receive more nourishment and not be as dry, and it can loosen so that hydration can get through, and more plants can sprout up and grass can grow again. And he just gives this picture of symbiosis that we're missing on the planet by not seeing the big picture, and how important it is that we farm plants and animals together, and how important it is that we appreciate the role of animals, not only in how they give our lives for us to get these crucial nutrients, but how they serve the land. It was just such an incredible insight into the mind of a farmer who is doing things the quote right way, in right relationship with the land, and who is changing the world. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. My jaw was dropped half the time and I felt giddy. And that is how I want you guys to feel. Giddy, inspired, awe, all the things. And as always, I thank you so much for being here with me each and every week, and for feeling something from these conversations together. I hope that there's ripples in your life in some way from these episodes. I'll see you next time. Okay, are you ready?
We feel each other's emotions.
It's everything. It's living my life intentionally.
That's the message, right?
Absolutely. There's no difference between our mental health and our physical health. It's the same exact thing.
And without further ado, let's get juicy. Hi, Taylor. So nice to have you on What's the Juice?
Olivia, it's so nice to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for what you do at Force of Nature. I can't wait to talk about regenerative farming and meat and what we're going to do about this whole climate situation.
Dude, let's dig in, and honestly, let's get as weird as you want to get weird. 'Cause I like to get woo too. I know you like to go down that route every now and then.
Oh, I'm all about the woo. The community is all about the woo. So I definitely want to talk about the spiritual implications wherever you can fit it in. I'm going to really be asking you about the logistics of, factory farming, meat consumption, regenerative farming, monocropping, all that stuff. But go Zach Bush with it.
Done. He's definitely a hero of mine.
My first question right off the bat I want to ask you is, what are the main issues with factory farming, including some of these future-focused implications that go far beyond just the quality of our meat?
Wow, we're just diving right into it. I love it. Factory farming breaks all of nature's principles. And so, you have human evolution over the last 250,000 years. We're blessed to be on this earth. We're blessed to receive the fruit of Mother Earth and these natural systems. And factory farming is a desecration against all those systems. And so what I mean by that is, in order to industrialize food, you're hyper-focusing the effort on food to think about output. And so you're thinking about yield. And at the compromise and at the sacrifice of the output equation is the loss or the disconnection from the actual nutrient density or the cultural implications, the community, us as humans belonging to something greater. It's all being lost, and it's all being really reduced to just a fraction of what agriculture actually can do and the potential of it. And so the issues with factory farming is they're very input driven. I like to say it's chemical and mechanical warfare against Mother Nature. And to paint kind of a picture of this, I think this is really interesting because most people have never actually visited a farm or ranch that they buy food from. I've read something like 98% of people have actually never stepped on the land that supports them and sustains their lives, their life energy force, their bodies, their family. which is wild. So we have a big disconnection problem. So maybe I'll paint a picture of what factory farming actually looks like. And after, the Industrial Revolution is ramping up, World War II, 1940s, there's an abundance of chemical nitrogen and war materials, essentially created for bombs, for chemical warfare. That industry is burgeoning, it's evolving, and the fruits of that industry are now introduced into agriculture. And
is that when factory farming began, just to clarify, after World War II?
Yep. Yeah. So kind of like the 1930s, 1940s was really when we accelerated this notion of industrial factory farming as a civilization. And it's become the prevailing dominant way that food is produced ever since. And when you factory farm, you essentially you deplete nature of the natural cycles that create abundance and create fertility. And you are obligated to put chemicals. So I think like living fertility versus synthetic fertility. Synthetic fertility is chemical inputs. And so it's like your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium. It is your herbicides. It is your pesticides. And I mean, it is baffling how many billions and billions of pounds of these chemicals are put on our food every year. The last time I did the math, it was something like there's 0.5 pound of glyphosate alone put on food crops globally to account for every single person. So every single person, their food production, it's 0.5 pound of glyphosate. And so we have this chemical system, and the way that you dominate and you control nature to grow a monoculture, which is factory farming, never in nature we have a single species of plant, is to use a tractor, to use a till, and then to use chemical inputs to control and force Mother Nature to succumb to your power.
So you mentioned having an abundance of nitrogen in the soil after World War II. Is that from the weaponry and the chemical weapons?
Yep. Yeah. Nitrogen was kind of this key ingredient for productivity. It's been human knowledge for a long time. We used to cycle nitrogen. Nitrogen is in the atmosphere. It's abundant. Almost 90% of the air in that room that you're in, above your head in the ether, is nitrogen. And so we have legume plants, which are beans that actually fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, put it in the soil. And this is ancient knowledge. People have been doing this for millennia, for 10,000 years, since the advent of agriculture. But that ancient wisdom has kind of been lost and replaced with a non-living synthetic chemical form of nitrogen.
When I heard you say nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, these are kind of like the fertilizing chemicals that we're dumping pounds and pounds of into the soil. What are we missing by focusing on just these few minerals or chemicals that get the plants to grow and totally leaving out the rest of the minerals?
It is so obvious that there's something wrong with that. And it's so obvious that it's a very reductionist, simplistic, linear view of agriculture. And it's very obvious that there's going to be unintended consequences if we focus the conversation just on nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, or your NPK, as you've kind of mentioned. It's like on the labels of all the fertilizers you will see at the store. And so, there's a couple ways to think about this. One way that I think about it is we have a tremendous loss in soil or in the nutrition of our food. So your grandparents' generation, for example, for every 1 pound of meat that they would consume, our generation today has to consume 2 pounds of meat to receive the equivalent phytonutrients, kind of like that dark matter of nutrition. And then the same can be said with our plant-based system, which is even more skewed, where for every apple or orange your grandparents would eat, our generation now has to eat 10 to 15 apples and oranges to get the same nutrients, so those micronutrients in the food. So we've really just created this non-living soil in which the only way we can add nutrients is through synthetic chemical inputs. But in a biologically active system, all those minerals, all those symbiotic relationships are functioning in a virtuous way to create nourishing food.
So here's the disconnect. I think that I myself and a lot of our listeners have been told by very smart individuals and scientists that are looking to help the world, feed the world, help the climate, that monocropping, genetically modified organisms, are the way that we're going to feed and save the world. What is the issue there, and where's the untruth?
There is such a fallacy with that statement. Doubling down on our current industrial mindset with agriculture is just perpetuating the existing broken system. there's been some estimates by by scientists who have studied soil systems for a long time, and we're losing soil at such an exponential rate that we're racing towards the cliff. And there can be 50, 60 years left of soil before we've lost the nutrient density of our topsoil. And then the system is completely degraded to the point at which the only way we can produce food is with chemicals. And so, this very reductionist, it's almost an arrogance, I think, where humans have separated ourselves from nature. We've separated ourselves from land. We are from nature. We are land. We are indigenous, all of us. And if you don't believe me, it's like the atoms that are in your body were atoms that have been cycled through time in perpetuity. Like you could have bald eagle in your eyeballs. You could have owl spirit. You could have comet spirit. I mean, crystals, that's what makes us up. And so I think we just forget that we belong to planet Earth and inherently we can do better. There's this notion that humans are inherently destructive. I don't believe in that. I think our ways are misguided. Our ways are destructive. Industrial agriculture is a great example of that, but we as a species are not. We have the tremendous potential to be a part of a greater solution. And I think for us to really realize that and own that, we have to reconnect back to our roots, back to the land, back to the earth from which we were born and which we will be cycled after our death.
I couldn't agree more. I really like what you're saying about humans not being inherently destructive. I think humans are inherently good. We want to help one another. We care a lot about each other and the world. And perhaps it's more so that what we have learned to value is what's inherently destructive. The fact that we've learned to value the quantity over quality, or that immense output as a result of this late stage capitalistic system that we're in. Perhaps that is the issue, that we've been taught to value this sort of abstract thing, which is just more versus the quality and the connection. And I think it also goes back to what you said earlier about 98% of people never having stepped foot on a farm that has grown their food. So how do you think the world would change if we flipped that and 98% of people had stepped on a farm that grew their food?
That would be a beautiful, brilliant system that's consistent with how our species evolved for millennia. I think it would return us back to something that's greater than all of us collectively, back to a Mother Earth that undoubtedly is more forgiving. Her capacity for forgiveness is greater than our species' capacity for destruction. And we could create such a profound change in our civilization as our global civilization that we could very quickly right some of the wrongs. Very quickly, we could correct some of our misguided steps. And I think a part of this, too, is this focus on materialism and extraction, kind of as you mentioned, that's a little bit woven into the fabric of our society. And if we kind of reconnect back to the land, we have this ability to reflect back within ourselves. So again, it's not so much of an external output-based way that we perceive the world, but more of an internal development to which we can be in sync and in harmony with a greater system.
Yeah, it's shifting from what can we get out of the land, how can we use it, to how can we work with the land and restore our connection to it.
Yeah. Charles Eisenstein, he said something that was really profound, and it was something along the lines of, we call Mother Earth, and we've done that forever. And it's time for an evolution in that relationship, because as a mother and a child's relationship dynamics go, it's very take. It's very extractive. It's very the child always wants. And so it's the evolution of our species and maybe our spirit and how we co-create with landscape and one another is becoming a partner with Mother Earth. So it's no longer Mother Earth. It's a romantic relationship where there's mutual love, mutual respect, and a care and a compassion at a higher degree that's very symbiotic.
Mm. I think for a lot of people listening, this all sounds very beautiful and idealistic. And yet we're faced with these statistics of how many people in the world are food insecure and going hungry. And that's where I think a lot of people fall into the thinking that we have to just keep monocropping more and developing more chemicals to put more food into the world to feed those people. And so it becomes this kind of conflict in the mind and in the narrative. So I want to shift to, what does this beautiful, idealistic reconnection and solution actually look like? What is regenerative farming?
the most standard definition of regenerative farming, which I do want to say very clearly, I think it is our best path forward. It's our best step forward into the future because our current industrial system is broken. So I want to be really clear about that. And I also want to be clear that regenerative agriculture has the potential to feed a global population. And what we've seen here at our ranch, we can get into, but we have 3 times more bison or more animal units per acre of land than anyone else in our county. So as we heal the soil, we can create more abundance. We can grow more grass. We can host more wildlife. We can feed more animals, which can feed a greater amount of our community. And so we can get into that more, but I think regenerative agriculture has this tremendous potential to feed people. And sorry, going back, what was the other part? Oh, what does it look like, or how do you define it?
Yeah, what does it look like and what is it? How is it different from what we're doing today?
Yes. Okay. So, like a more standard definition of regenerative agriculture might be something like looking into the cycles of nature and correcting or fixing those cycles so that nature can self-correct. Nature is always self-organizing, self-healing, self-structuring. It's amazing. And so you're putting the cycles in place to where an abundance, a virtuous cycle of productivity can be created. And so it's a biomimicry. And when I say fixing the broken cycles of nature, I'm talking about fixing the cycles that have been broken due to conventional industrial factory farming. And so those are things like the nutrient cycle, the water cycle, the energy cycle, the nitrogen cycle. There's so many of these. And so for me, it's like step 1, what do I do to move my land management in that regenerative set? These principles, I cover bare soil. And anywhere in the world, it's like, I'm in Texas, we're on a ranch, so I can use this analogy, but you have to visualize this. Like you could get a gun and you could shoot a bullet into the air, just not even aiming. And that bullet's going to eventually fall down somewhere on the planet. And where that bullet falls down, there's a high probability, I'd say almost 99% likelihood that where that bullet lands, if you marked off a square foot of soil, 99% of that soil would be bare. And so that's the industrial system. We're only operating at a fraction of the potential of productivity of the system. And so what happens if you double that blade of grass? Well, you doubled your productivity. You can feed twice as many people. Now, granted, we need more than just one blade of grass to feed a person, but you get the idea. Like it adds up. And when we can get to the point of 100% covered soil with a green growing plant, I mean, you're crushing it. We're really talking about changing the whole system, carbon sequestration, recharging aquifers, food security, feeding rural populations, revitalizing rural economies. I mean, it's an absolute game changer that makes a ton of sense to me.
And so you're saying the goal is to heal those blades of grass that currently cannot sustain food being grown upon them.
So agriculture, really at the end of the day, what we're doing in agriculture when we plant food is we are taking the energy from the sun, which light energy is this amazing particle form passing through the cosmos, not only of our sun, but also suns in distant solar systems of different galaxies, like light that is etheric and in the atmosphere and through the cosmos comes to planet Earth. And a green growing plant, through the power of photosynthesis, creates this opportunity for a phase shift. And that light turns into a physical matter. So part of that light, I mean, this is absolutely magical. It's beautiful. But part of that light particle turns into the grass. Part of that light particle cycles into the soil. Part of that light particle becomes the animal that consumes that grass. It becomes us. And so really what I want to do, what I want to focus on is how much green growing plants, how much photosynthesis, how much light energy can I hold on an acre of land? Because that light energy is a battery. It is energy that's not only growing inward, but also expanding outward. So as below, as above. And that's really the secret. That's the trick. And it's very simple to think about it this way, but we're missing the point when we go straight to industrial agriculture because we're not even concerned with living light energy. We're concerned with chemicals that are extracted, that are processed, that are synthetic, and we're just propping up a broken system. And so it's like, that's expensive, that's destructive, there's unintended consequences. But when we just focus on light energy, it's all free, it's all abundant, and the whole system benefits from it.
I love that. Well, you're so passionate about this. I want to know your story. I want to know how long you've been farming. I want to know what it was like spending the last decade studying regenerative agriculture at ranches around the world and how you sort of switched your ranch around.
Yeah, golly, it's been such a fun journey. I always reflect on, like, when I was in middle school, I took a vocational test. I don't know if did you take a vocational test?
I don't think so.
I felt like it was mandatory in Austin Independent School District.
Maybe like the Regents kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe you just went to a really awesome school that didn't try to pigeonhole you into what you would eventually be when you were an adult. But there was nowhere on this like career path test that ever illuminated a path to being in agriculture. Just like wasn't a thing. There's only 2% of Americans are actually involved in growing food. So maybe I thought like agriculture is irrelevant. That's not really a good career path for anyone to go into. But that has been my highest calling. And I feel so blessed and so lucky to do it. I found my way to where I am today, which is stewarding land, co-creating with Mother Nature. I found that path through my own nutrition, my own health journey, and my wife, Katie. She specifically, like when we were children, of course, we grew up with standard American diet, really sick, thought we were going to clean it up in a way that was good for the planet, good for ourselves, went to like the far extreme of veganism, juicing,
Same.
Raw. Yeah. I mean, that's like maybe the dark period of before enlightenment. But I think our heart was really aligned in that, like the values that I hold today are still the values that led me down a vegan pathway. It was like compassion for animals, stewardship of the earth and our natural resources, love for nature. Like I still feel those, but even to a greater extent now. So went on that pathway that you've been down, also probably had a very similar crash, kind of implosion experience, and had some major health issues and kind of shifted back to a more whole food, balanced diet. Really started for the first time in many years consuming grass-fed animal protein from ruminants like cows and bison. And just felt like this highest level of vitality and exuberance, just like didn't remember the last time I felt so good. And so then it's like, what's going on here? Let's learn more about the animals that we're consuming. And then that's when I found regenerative agriculture, because it's like this 3-legged stool. And I had only known that there was 2 legs on the stool. And those 2 legs I thought was, human health and human nutrition comes from eating a species appropriate diet. So like omnivore diet, grass-fed animals. So I was like, got that. And then the second leg on the stool was the animals have to be consuming the diet that they were biologically engineered. So like you can't be consuming animals from feedlot factory farm settings. That's a desecration against nature. Okay, like I'm down with this. It's very clear. And then the third leg to that stool that took me a little while to find is you can't have human health, you can't have animal health without underlying soil health. That is the foundation for all nourishment on the planet. Doesn't matter if you're vegan, doesn't matter if you're carnivore. It all begins and ends in the soil. And so one of the early things I remember learning about was when we were starting to study soil and we were studying plant nutrition, was that all of the grasses that we were growing out at our ranch, when we did early plant tissue testing, we bought this ranch from a very conventional industrial factory farm model. And when we did our plant tissue test that you send to a laboratory, our plants were very low in iron, magnesium, selenium, copper, calcium, these elements or these minerals that humans are also depleted in. So I was like, what's going on here? Like, why is this a mirror of what's happening globally?
Yep, we're all out here taking selenium supplements and we're wondering why we even need to do that. Exactly.
And so that was just like this profound aha moment of the connection between soil, plant, and animal, and that food chain and that food web. And the exciting part is learning that all of those minerals, so the selenium, the boron, the magnesium, the calcium, the iron, that is all innate in the soil. That has not gone anywhere, but the soil needs the functioning biology. It needs the community of life to collaborate with one another and fix those minerals and bring them to the plant to where they're available. And then when it's available for the plant, it's available for the human or the animal. And so when we purchased our ranch, sorry, I kind of got a little bit excited about that, but
I love that. No, I think it's actually important that people understand that the reactions and the ecosystem that's going on below the soil, such as different bacteria and bugs sort of digesting minerals from rocks and such and putting them in the plants, is how the plants become mineral rich. There is actually a whole life, like a bug's life, going on underneath the soil.
Yeah, it should be. And, in a tablespoon of healthy soil from a regenerative farm like ours, you could expect to find more living organisms than all humans on the face of the planet since the starting of time. So that is how complex that network of living sentient biological organisms are. And then if you go to the factory farm that we kind of talked about at the beginning of this interview and take a soil sample, there might be one or two single species. And so it's just like such a vast difference. And that network of life carrying light is really exactly what you said. It's the factor of whether or not we are nourishing our bodies, nourishing our earth, and nourishing our animals.
Yeah.
So when we bought the ranch, it was just this, again, like a calling. It just felt like this was kind of a divine purpose or an intervention for us to move out here. And we bought a 900-acre, very degraded, very conventional ranch in Texas Hill Country. And it had been farmed conventionally, industrially, extractively for over 100 years. And so, you got out here and it looked like the surface of the moon. There was not a plant in sight. All those cycles of nature had been broken. So every time it rained, you think, hey, rain, like water is life, right? Every time it rained, the soil had been bare for over a year, that when the rain particles hit the soil was hardened and it was capped. Because rain specifically, it's like 25 mile per hour impact. And if you could look at a rain particle hitting the soil in slow motion, it's like a bomb going off. And so we were getting rain, but none of the rain was infiltrating. We weren't capturing any of it. It was all running off. And so back to kind of like fixing these broken cycles of nature that are incurred through industrial agriculture. It's like step number one, we got to get the rainfall into our soil. And then step number two is we got to cover that soil. So when we do get rain, it doesn't evaporate when the sun comes back out. And so it's just a little context there, but we recruited bison. We picked bison to be kind of like our primary co-creative species because they're North America's largest native land mammal. These are like the largest descendants of prehistoric creatures that survived the last ice age. And they're keystone species. And so why would we choose anything else than the native keystone species of our ecoregion? And so we brought bison out to the property, and those fields that were like the surface of the moon that the rain couldn't get in. The first thing we asked the bison to do was break up that capped soil. And so instead of using a mechanical tool, using fossil fuels to run tractors, we rolled out hay, which hay is carbon. And then we rolled it out and we put the herd in these fields, and their hoofs, every time they step, they chip away at that capped soil, which allows the earth to breathe, and it allows rainfall to infiltrate, and it allows little seeds that have been, capped under concrete to express themselves for the first time. And so that's the beauty of working in synchrony with Mother Nature and these biological systems that predate us and that are very complex, but very, I wouldn't say efficient, but serves a way that all shareholders benefit.
Yeah, it just makes me think of the way that we're so afraid of bugs and even animals. And I guess, for good reason, you don't necessarily want bison roaming around your backyard when your child is back there playing. But, other than that, we have become so disconnected from the fact that we share this land with animals and always have. And they play a very important role and purpose in keeping the ground, the soil, the plants healthy, even just as they move, just as they live and exist. And we've built these cities and these structures and these homes where we're trying to keep everything out. And yet, if we could just find a way to work together, which is what you did on your farm, everything would be a lot healthier.
Oh my gosh, it kind of drives me crazy. You're so right. And this is like the ultimate example of our separation from nature. How can we take a species like a bison or an animal or a living sentient being, as these are keystone species, so they're the creators of our most fertile food systems the planet has ever seen through their animal impact, And not only are we not honoring that species, but we're demonizing it now in the mainstream narrative. We're telling people cows are bad, bison are bad, we need to eat less of them, when really we should be celebrating them. They are gifts from spirit, a higher power. I mean, there is no human creativity that could mimic what a ruminant animal can do for a healthy landscape.
I mean, yeah, and if we're all running around eating Impossible Burgers and saying that we can't have meat anymore and we need to just eat fake meat, and then we get rid of even more animals, what's going to happen? It's not a sustainable future. And this is the direction that the green narrative is going. And it really scares me.
Yeah, the plant-based system inherently is an extractive system. The fallacy or the false prophecy of impossible foods or beyond meat, I think consumers are awakening to this and the reality that it's not a better alternative. They've been lied to and they've been deceived. But in order to grow a monoculture, which are the ingredients in the plant-based meat alternatives, you have to extract. So you're literally taking a fruit or a plant product that's above ground and you're removing it from the system. You're doing that year over year, season over season. But when are you putting nourishment back into the system in the form of light, in the form of a living energy source? And so let's not talk about chemical energy. That's the only way you can perpetuate that system. But it's like a bank account where if every year you're removing from that bank account, but you're never putting back in, that bank account is going to collapse. You're going to run out of money or fertility in that account. Same thing is happening to the soil.
Just to give folks context, when farmers are in this monoculture, monocropping system where they're mainly growing corn and soy, often genetically modified, in order to feed factory farmed animals or in order to make all of these corn, soy, processed foods and meats that we have on our shelves nowadays. The issue that you're talking about is that there's no period of letting the land rest, right?
There's no period of letting the land rest, and there's no cycling fertility in a living form back into the land. And that's one of the beautiful parts of an animal. And the way that an animal cycles fertility, let's just use a bison, for example, and people can do this with, let's look at a monoculture plant-based production, but let's look at it when they incorporate animals and they don't have to use synthetic chemical inputs. And so, say you're growing your cash crop. So maybe it's soy or corn or whatever. And it's very extractive. You come in and you harvest that, but you leave stubble. And then you can come in with a seeder and you can plant a cover crop, maybe some nitrogen fixing legumes to regenerate the soil. And then the really important part is you bring ruminant animals like cow or bison through that system, and then they graze. They take bites of the residual cash crop. They eat some of the grasses that you planted, some of the legumes, and then that fertility goes through their system. They inoculate it with their own microbiome. And then when it comes out the other end, it's this perfect, living, digestible form of plant nutrient. And then the soil takes that back up. And then the next season, the plants are more healthy. And so that's how it works. And that's why an animal is so important. If you remove the animal from the system, you never cycle that fertility back into the soil. You always have to import it.
So in reality, what you're saying is that the animals at the end of the day, through their feces, end up providing the quote chemical fertilizer that we are just using in synthetic form and pumping into the soil in this very disconnected, incomplete way to just force plants to grow. But if you just had the animals on the land, they would provide that for the soil at far less of a cost.
Exactly. I mean, this is it makes so much sense to me, and it's free. Again, these are animals that are harvesting. Their only inputs are the sun and some rain. And then you're just kind of letting these natural processes work. And just if someone is hearing this and they don't believe it, I mean, you have to go back in time. So it was less than 200 years ago that the land that is now the United States of America had 60 to 80 million bison, had 20 to 30 million pronghorn antelopes, 20 to 30 million elk, something like 10 million wild horses. And so you had tremendous amounts of ruminant animal impact on our landscapes. And those were migratory species. And so they came in, they created that positive stimulus for growth, for enrichment, and then they left. And that was the cycle, the cadence of nature. There was predators on the prairies that hunted them, that forced them to move. They were also in such high density that they would utilize their resources. There was no more grass left. or they didn't want to hang out with all their friends' manure. And so the animals always moved. And that is how landscapes co-evolved with animals. And so when we remove the animal from that system and put it in a very controlled, static, input-derived factory model, we are desecrating this brilliant architecture of nature that has been gifted to us. And through human arrogance, for some reason, thinking that we're doing a better job when really it's just awful. And I think we both agree with that statement.
Yeah. What would happen if a factory farm brought a bunch of bison on their land today? What would start happening? Would that be would that help the land? Would it be a problem because of the methods that they're already using?
So bison are like romance, hero, iconic American species. We love them, but they're not the only regenerative being. And so a cow or a sheep or a goat can be managed like a bison would have, migrated and grazed for millennia. And so it's not like the bison is uniquely gifted or suited. It's really like the evolutionary intelligence is still encoded in a bison. Whereas beef cows, they have been bred for thousands of years to kind of have certain traits that are more favorable, like really fast yield, so quick weight gain without consideration to underlying metabolic health, bone density, nutrients, things like that. And so we can ask cows and we can ask sheep to graze like bison. And that's really the great wisdom. But if we did what's called managed grazing or holistic planned grazing, which is a part of regenerative agricultural principle, and we put it in a factory kind of feedlot model, what you would want to do is you would want to get like 1,000 bison in there for one day, and then you'd want to pull them out and let that land rest for a year. That's perfect scenario, but that's not very practical because that's what would happen in nature.
That makes sense. It's kind of, that's where I'm trying to bridge here, and maybe I'm doing so poorly, but I'm trying to bridge the whole, we're doing things the wrong way. Sure, we're getting, quote, high output of very poor quality food, and we're being told that that is the only solution to feed the world, but we're doing it that way. That's the road that we're going down. And I'm almost trying to bridge the listener to help us understand how would we get from this model to everyone having the regenerative, grass-fed, ruminant grazed, healthy soil model where we could feed the world healthier food and make it a lot cheaper because everyone's doing it, Mm-hmm. And so it sounds to me like what you're saying is that it wouldn't necessarily be a quick, easy, or overnight fix because we're already so deep into that system and would need to let the land rest.
Yep, there would be a transitional period. Absolutely. The interesting component, though, is we have the land mass. So we have the acreage globally to support a regenerative model to feed the global population the highest nutrient-dense grass-fed animal protein. The land mass is not our limiting resource. The limiting resource is us. It's like looking in the mirror. It is recognizing that we are set in our ways. We are stubborn as a species. And it's really the hardest thing to do is change our mindset. And so more and more people are picking up on these regenerative practices. It's unfortunately coming at a point where farmers and ranchers are backed up against the wall, doing it industrially, conventional in a factory setting. It's very hard to make a living. There's incredible high suicide rates of farmers and ranchers. Multi-generational ranchers have no opportunities. Kids don't want to come back to the farm. There's also exposures to all types of carcinogenic chemicals that are another deterrent. Just general collapse of rural economies, everything being kind of consolidated and industrialized. But when those families are back up against the wall and the system doesn't work and they don't know what to do, that's when this beacon of hope, they can change their mindset and adopt a different path forward. So I hope that it doesn't have to be that way with everyone, but I think there are more satellites that are demonstrating this powerful potential. The more neighbors can look over and see a fence line and kind of question, like, what are you doing over there? Why do you have all the awesome elk in our entire neighbor community? Why are all the bald eagles on your side? Like what's going on? And then that's kind of a gateway to what we're talking about.
When you're talking about what's happening in rural America to farmers and their mental health, and to even the fact that their kids don't want to come back and continue the lineage and be farmers, not only is that happening in America, it's happening around the world. One of my close friends, China, she works in Ecuador and Guatemala. And when she visited farmers in Guatemala who were growing cacao monocrops, because there's a huge demand for cacao and chocolate, and you know, Hershey's wants all of this Guatemalan grown chocolate. She found that they were getting paid such pennies on the dollar for all of this hard work on their family land that had been passed down for generations, that used to be diverse and healthy. And that it was such a terrible existence that their kids were moving away from the rural farms and going to get jobs in the city that were far more, again, abstract, right? Going to get jobs in marketing, not going to get jobs helping the land. And they were not wanting to continue this life and be stewards of their family land. And I can only imagine how difficult it is to be passionate about your land and about farming when you're doing it in this industrialized, closed, forcible way, and you don't have a community around you where you're kind of sharing, hey, here's what I'm growing today. Here's what I found out really works on my land. Do you want to trade this crop for that crop? The community is what's missing because it's just becoming a product now.
Yeah, it's like what you're saying is we're replacing agriculture with agribusiness. And agriculture is the people, whereas we're removing the people, we're commoditizing the whole thing. And like in a really conspiracy theorist way, like, isn't this probably the best way to control people, is to remove them from their source of food, from their source of nourishment, from their source of health? I just think it's interesting that a lot of like the billionaires of our generation are buying up farmland when your friend and other farmers in the United States have disproportionate suicide rates to other professions. And so it's like this consolidation of wealth, consolidation of land, consolidation of control. And so that's for me. I think there's a little bit of a pendulum swinging where people are picking up on this, and really to like have complete autonomy and freedom and independence in your life and in your decision and the way you want to live. You need to be able to know how to grow your own food at the end of the day. And then I also think that, you know, like the United States of America it was a country based on agriculture. Like our founding fathers were all farmers. So when like 1776 rolled around and the American Revolution happened, our founding fathers literally had to take breaks from different battles and go back to their farms to harvest crops. And this was like 98% of the country. And so, I mean, just fast forward now to where it's less than 2% of our population. And just think about like the loss of our history and the loss of our identity and the loss of our culture and the wisdom of nutrients that has become irrelevant from the separation of who we are. And I think we certainly are struggling as a nation to really define our identity, to know who we are, to know our values, to come together as a collective people, even with your neighbors that maybe don't have the same political perspectives. But there's so much more potential to restart and shift back to these rural areas where you can start with community, with those relationships and with those people.
I didn't realize that our founding fathers had to come back from battle and harvest their crops. I mean, that's a character building, humbling, connective experience. Really, I think I'd be a much better person if I had to take a break from making TikToks and go harvest my crops.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you're so much more in tune with your community, but you're also more in tune with nature, because you're like, hey, there's a big freeze coming in 2 nights. Like, this is the cycle of the energy of our region. We have to get out there before the crops are destroyed. Or, you know, like there's this big rain event coming. So you're like paying attention to the sky, you're paying attention to the constellations. You have a better perception of a physical and etheric reality that humans evolved to experience. So you're just like tapped in, more in tune with your surroundings.
It makes me really emotional, you saying this. I'm getting very emotional because my teachers in herb school, Richard Mandelbaum and Claudia Kiel, they used to always say that, you know, we have this epidemic of loneliness, right, in our country. It's only getting worse. So many people are lonely, or like you said, with farmers, but with everyone. Suicide rates are rising. There's a mental health crisis. And my teachers would always say that plants can actually be our friend. And if we can become in relationship with those plants, we can feel less alone. And you're taking it a step further, going even more macro and reminding us that if we develop a relationship with the cycles of nature and the weather, and if we feel like we know those cycles, if we can say, oh yeah, that freeze is coming. Oh yeah, that wind feels a little different. I know that wind. I'm friends with it. We can actually feel a little bit less alone in our human world and environment, and just have a little bit more of that grounded connectiveness that makes us feel alive.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to say it, and a beautiful thought. And I think, all energy is, like we talk about, like we're energetic beings, and all these things we've talked about, bison are energetic beings, plants are energetic beings, herbs, just like everything has a frequency that it resonates with. And I have to believe that that energy is for the purpose of communication, and like the message that we are receiving. I think the ether, I think the world is sending us signals, but this goes back to our disconnection from being able to receive those signals. Maybe like our arrogance again. Oh, should we double down on factory farming? Can we do the same thing and expect different results? Whereas like the people who are more in tune with this, who are in more relationship with their food, I think they're receiving those signals and they can feel a need for a shift. And that is certainly something that makes me feel hopeful about the future. Yeah.
There's even an example in how much less alone you feel, for example, with your pet or your animal. When you can interpret one of your animal signals and know, oh, hey, they're actually feeling a little bit cold. Let me give them a blanket and make them feel better. Or, oh, I know that cry. That's the cry when they're hungry, or that's the cry when they're not feeling well. It makes you feel so good to be in relationship to them and be able to interpret what they need, what they're saying, what they're doing. And they don't have to talk to you to do that, nor do you have to speak to each other like humans would to feel that level of fulfillment and connection from that knowing. And I think we can receive that same fulfillment and connection from the knowing of, like you said, what the freeze is going to do, what the wind means, what the sky is looking like, and what it can tell us. And I feel like there's so much of the human experience that we're missing out on by not being able to interpret the signals around us because we've gone so far away from that.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful example. The dog, I sometimes think of like when you're a kid and your mom comes home from work, and like within, fractions of a second, if your mom had a good day or a bad day, just based on like that energetic capacity that she's bringing into the room. And so you're right, we have that innate ability, and we also have this beautiful ability, this way to interact with our environment and with each other called biobehavioral synchrony. Like this has actually been scientifically proven with babies. So like when a little beautiful child is born into the world, for a long time, the first thing that happened was the mother would put that baby on her body. And if like there was a little bit of arrhythmia, or that child was having a hard time breathing in its first few moments of life, it would synchronize, it would harmonize with the mother's heartbeat. And this is just beautiful because there's something about touch and sharing that energy and sharing those vibrational frequencies that we can impart that same rhythm and that same synchrony with our land. And so maybe what we need to do is less Zoom calls. Maybe we need to just do like less TikTok videos and like take our shoes off and touch the earth, because that same potential we have of embracing our child, like we have to remember we are children of the earth. And so it's like a long lost touch from your mother. And the great thing I think is like the earth, Mother Earth, she never is upset. She's never pissed off that you're not checking in with her. The second you take your shoes off, the second you touch her, it could be a tree, it could be a flower, it could be a bison, dog. It's just like this instant hug that she wants to give you, to remind you that she loves you, to remind you that you came from her. And it's just a really beautiful kind of synchronization of this experience as being alive.
You can't have me crying like this on a Wednesday. This is this is serious. I even think of it as the example you said earlier about when you looked at your soil sample and you did your plant matter sample of the, previously factory farmed soil that you had, and versus your sample now, where you have as many microbes as there have ever been humans on the planet. And I think about how good we feel. I think we've all had this experience, how good we feel after we've had a day of connecting with a lot of different people. Whether it was a day where we went to our family's house and all the family was together and we got to hang out with like 20 different folks that we love, or it was a day that we went to some event and we got to meet all of these new people and be so inspired by all of the new humans and connections and all the love. That is what makes a soul happy. You get home from that day and you don't want to pour yourself a drink or scroll on your phone. You get home from that day and you're good inside. And then I think about the soil, the factory farm soil, where there was 2 species of microbes. And it's like the more isolated we become, the less we become in touch with the sky, our dog, our friends, our family, the plants, the herbs, the more alone we feel. And I think that is at the root of the chronic illness, chronic stress epidemic that we're having in our world. It's why we're getting richer and richer and richer, and yet people are sicker than ever.
Yeah, I love that. I think one way to think about our food and how we consume it, it's like we're starving with our bellies full. And it's, I also think of what you're saying reminds me of like this idea of where energy goes, where energy flows. And like when you have those powerful experiences with people who love you, who embrace you, who you share these beautiful community ideas and how it energizes you, the same thing happens on land when you move to that regenerative model. And there's like this energy that's present here and on other ranches where all of nature wants to come and check in. And I kind of mentioned like the deer, the elk, things like that, but we have bald eagles on our ranch. I grew up in this area. I never saw a bald eagle in my entire life, and I'm 41 years old. We have 2 bald eagles that live here. We have more great horned owls than I could ever count. When we first moved to the ranch, we did a bird survey with the Audubon group, which is like a really beautiful bird conservation group. And we had less than 10 different species of birds that felt welcomed on this ranch. Now, 7 years later, we have over 140 different species of birds. And so that's just like this beautiful idea of like where the energy is circulating, where it's flowing, like more life wants to be involved. And that's a great expression of life. And that's, like you've already mentioned, that's what fills my cup, maybe what fills your cup day to day too. And something we could certainly all strive to be a little bit more involved in.
It just reminds me how you can't cheat that. You can't replace it with anything else. And you certainly can't cheat nature. And I guess that answers my question earlier of why is it a fallacy that we can feed the world with monocropping and just doing more of this disconnected chemical farming. It's that requires taking away. In order for that closed system to work, you have to take away all the pests. You have to take away all the bugs. You have to take away all the surrounding animals that could munch on those plants and lower the yield. And we know that what happens when you take away species is disease is created. An example is the fact that we killed off / removed so many of the wolves in, I believe it's New York. And actually, I'll check with you. Is it New York with the deer and the ticks?
Oh yeah, it's
like
everywhere.
We killed off so many of the wolves in the tri-state area. And that is what helped, the deer population was controlled by the wolves. And because the deer population exploded and had no predator, no ecosystem to control them, deers populated out of control and started becoming these wild carriers of Lyme disease, and more humans started getting sick from Lyme disease. So you think you're doing a favor by removing a pest, a wolf, but it actually just creates disease in another way. And that's the same thing that's happening with our monocropping and our GMO crops. We're removing all the pests, and yet we're creating disease in our bodies.
Nature abhors a monoculture. Nature perceives a monoculture as a vacuum, and that space will always be filled. It will never be remaining a vacuum, and what comes in first are those undesirable pest species. And so one of the principles of regenerative agriculture is promoting biodiversity. Biodiversity above ground, below ground, and your plant species, but also your animal species, your birds. It's like the more sentient beings, the more diverse forms of life you can contain, the better and the more resilient the system will be. And a really good analogy to the wolf example you gave is for each undesirable pest insect in a functioning ecosystem, there's 1,400 predator insects for that single undesirable pest insect. And so back to this concept of diversity, of resiliency, of checks and balances in nature, if we use pesticides on the system, we eliminate the 1,400 beneficial predator species. And then you have that, like the ticks, you have the mosquitoes, you have the chiggers, you have the black widows. It's like the things that we don't want, but they're like the first secession. That is Mother Nature filling a vacuum.
And then you got Bill Gates releasing GMO mosquitoes. Then it just all goes to shit.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to end well. I just think it's so weird that we don't even get to have a say in that. Like, shouldn't we be able to vote if we think that's a good idea? But yeah, I just think that we're outsourcing all of our critical thinking to non-elected technocrats and billionaires, as if they represent the interest of you and I. And that's a bad idea, because that's breaking that fundamental principle of regenerative agriculture, where it's like biodiversity, different thoughts, different opinions. It shouldn't just be one single pest organism, which is Bill freaking Gates, deciding what he wants to do to an entire planet.
He's my pest.
I know. You know what? Be a wolf. You need to be a wolf. Get him.
When Bill Gates takes a farm like the one that you took, a factory farm, and makes it regenerative and restores the soil, then I'll listen to the man. But until then, I want to hear the ending piece of your story, where you said you brought in the bison and had them graze on the hay and break up the soil. What happened after that? How did you continue to get your farm to where it is today?
Yeah, so that was kind of day one. We're a multi-species regenerative ranch now, and so we have turkeys, we do ducks, we have a honeybee apiary, we do pigs seasonally, we have chickens. The bison are still kind of the core, the heart, and the soul of what we do, but we also welcome 100,000 plus sentient beings in the form of wildlife to our ranch every year. And we set a place at the table for all of them because we want them to co-create. We want them to be here. And so, like when we think about the principles, I'll just go really quick through the principles of regenerative agriculture so your listeners can kind of like understand the framework in which we operate. So we talked about the bison is incorporating positive animal impact. Covering bare soil would be number 2. Increasing biodiversity would be number 3. Minimizing disturbance of the soil would be number 4. And then having a green growing plant year round would be number 5. And so those are like if we want to make it as simple as possible, those are the principles that all of our actions, all of our decisions, we check in with ourselves, we check in with nature, and we make sure we are in coherence with that architecture and that framework that has been gifted to us. We didn't create that. That is like literally like the image of how functioning ecosystems work. And so the bison come in, we start disturbing the seed bed, we start capturing rain for the first time in a long time. New seeds show up, new seeds germinate, grasses, like for every square foot of soil, you can expect there to be about 20 to 30,000 dormant native seeds waiting, buried. They could be buried for hundreds of years, and they're waiting for the right biological condition to germinate. And so it turns out that some of that biological condition that they need could be a bison pooping on it, or a bison urinating on it, or a bison trampling it, or some saliva from a bison's mouth touching the soil. And so we see this beautiful expression of life. We see new birds show up to the property. We see new insects show up to the property. We start seeing snakes showing up to the property and deer. And then before we know it, it's like the system starts working. And one of the most beautiful, I think, hopeful expressions of Mother Nature's forgiveness that we've been able to experience firsthand was when we bought the property. There was this riparian corridor, like this creek called Cave Creek. And the old man that we bought it from said, "We were so excited about a creek." And he said, "No, this is not a creek. This is a wet weather kind of drainage now. Like it hasn't flowed. I'm in my 80s. The other neighbors out here are in their 80s and 90s. No one can remember this creek flowing. So for what it is, I just want to be like, I want to be an open, honest seller of this land and let you know this creek will never flow." And I just felt like that was so interesting, and it really stuck with me. But in the matter of 3 years of managing our land regeneratively, the creek started flowing. Water emerged from rocks. And you have to ask yourself, like, how did that happen? What is going on? Are the bison like calling out to the rain clouds to rain more often? Maybe, but that's not exactly the point. But what happened was the first time in over 100 years, 450 acres of this property was able to capture rainfall for the first time in over 100 years. And as we're building our organic matter and our soil structure, we can capture more rainfall. And so we did it's called a rainfall infiltration test when we bought the property. Maximum that first year after the bison grazed, we could only capture about 1.5 million gallons of rain per 100 acres. That was it. Any other rain event we got greater than that, it would wash off. But 7 years later, fast forward, now we can capture 15 million gallons of rain on that 100 acres. And so what essentially happened was we were capturing rain, unbeknownst to us. The water table or the aquifer that's underneath our feet is slowly recharging, slowly rising, and it gets to this pressure gradient point where the water actually starts coming out of rocks, where no living human being has ever experienced that, but it probably was that way for tens of thousands of years. And so, like, how beautiful of a gift is that? You know, like a nod or a wink from Mother Nature, just saying, like, stick to it. The potential
here's your
is
gift.
So tremendous. Yeah.
Irrigation. I bring you this irrigation. I know my
water.
husband's over here trying to figure out how we can get some bison to stomp around in our backyard because our soil does not drain either.
Yeah, that is most soil is you'd say like dehydrated or constipated. I mean, yeah, having a hard time breathing if we want to humanize these issues, but that's a very global issue.
And the same thing is happening inside of our bodies. I'll link an old episode in the show notes with a fellow herbalist where we talked about how the soil within the gut, the actual terrain and the epithelial cells within the gut are so dehydrated because of our modern diets that we actually cannot receive cellular hydration. We almost have to loosen the soil within the guts too with mucilaginous plants and things like calendula in order to receive hydration. And that's why so many people are drinking all of this water every day and still feeling so parched and still suffering from the effects of dehydration. So it's happening in the land, it's happening in our bodies, as above, so below. And we could really use a lot of support in this world.
Yeah, everyone needs water. Water is life. We can only function at a fraction of our human potential if we're chronically dehydrated. Yeah. And so, let's hydrate our souls and let's hydrate our planet and our body.
So is this farm, the 900-acre farm that you restored, the farm in which the bison for Force of Nature meats comes from?
We sell bison to Force of Nature. My wife and I started Force of Nature a couple years ago with our friend Robbie. And we sell animals to Force of Nature. We sell like 3 trailer loads a year.
Wow.
And so that's a part of our supply chain. But the idea of Force of Nature is bigger than Rome Ranch. It is truly trying to create a new agricultural community where people are in relation with other ranches practicing regenerative techniques.
Yeah, because you guys can't feed everyone. We need everyone.
And we shouldn't, because if we try to, then we're right back at like the industrialization factory model where we're just hyper focused on output. And so what we really want to do is we want to grow grassroots, a community of like-minded land stewards, give them the opportunity to co-create with nature in harmony as nature evolved. And then at the end of the day, if this is going to work, it has to be up to the consumers. It's not going to be technocrats. It's not going to be billionaires. It's not going to be world governments that come in and save our civilization. Our planet's going to be fine, by the way, when we're gone. But it's not going to be someone else. It has to be you, me. It has to be our community of kind-hearted, caring, loving people that want to adopt and align their values with the food that they eat. And so at the end of the day, Force of Nature is just that. We are trying to allow people to vote with their dollars for a better, more virtuous system in which Mother Earth can allow to inhale, a deep exhale to heal herself. And we step back and we benefit from that indirectly.
I mean, it is truly our choice. I think about how many Americans consume things like ground beef. It's a very common household grocery item. And you have a chance every time you purchase that ground beef to purchase it from regenerative farmers, like the network of folks who are selling through Force of Nature Meats, or to order on Instacart from Whole Foods or Stop and Shop and support these conglomerates essentially. And so just voting with your dollars and supporting either your local farmer at the farmer's market who's doing things right, or folks like Force of Nature, you're able to shift the demand and you're able to put resources in the right people's hands.
Absolutely. It's like you can sow the seeds of the reality that your children and your grandchildren will inherit one day. It's like what you dream will become your reality, you know, like where you focus your energy, that is where your energy goes. And so instead of all of us feeling so paralyzed and feeling inherently that humans are bad and evil and destructive, let's shift that energetic focus and outlook and do something beautiful. And I think this is a really amazing way to live and to co-create and to gift our children with something that we can be really proud of.
Yeah. Now, I know I don't have to convince a lot of my listeners of the health benefits of eating meat, but I do want to just make sure that we address a bit of the climate piece because, again, we're having all of this green messaging that eliminating meat is the way to protect our climate. So can you tell us why eliminating meat is not the answer to climate protection and why regenerative farming methods in terms of animal agriculture can actually help us to sequester carbon?
Yeah, so the carbon conversation, that's an important piece of a greater whole. Typically, we take a very reductionist view of agriculture and we'll talk about, or we'll focus on climate, or we'll focus on climate interchangeable with carbon emission. And so there are so many benefits of regenerative agriculture that expand, that are greater than just this idea of carbon and climate. But this is one that people really pay attention to, really resonate with. And so one of the things that I'll just kind of mention two things, but when I kind of painted that picture of the American Serengeti before Europeans arrived to what is now the United States, there were more ruminant animals at that point in time in our country than there are cows today. And so it doesn't take a scholar or a scientist to recognize that carbon wasn't an issue back then. Climate change was not a concern back then, but we had more animals. So what's the relationship? It's not the animals that have ever been at fault. It is how humans have mismanaged the animals. So instead of demonizing, trying to eliminate meat for climate reasons, we should be celebrating the natural innate instincts of these animals, because when they're a part of a system, the system sequesters, pulls down, draws down more carbon than any other system. And then the other way I'll kind of objectify that and add some research to that is one of the coolest things that we had the opportunity to do in 2017 was participate in what's called a life cycle assessment. And so a life cycle assessment is where a third party group comes in and they measure every single input that goes into creating 1 pound of food. And we hired this consulting group called Quantis. And Quantis, unbeknownst to us, Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat had also hired Quantis at the exact same time that we did, which was super cool. And we looked at all the inputs, like the carbon, all the carbon emissions that go into producing regenerative beef specifically. And they looked at all the carbon emissions that go into producing 1 pound of synthetic fake meat. And their results were released a little bit before ours. And they were high-fiving, chest bumping, showed that for every 1 pound of fake meat that you ate, it was 1 pound of carbon was emitted versus 33 pounds of carbon from an industrial factory farmed beef cow. And I mean, that's horrible. They thought, this is it. This is the way we're going to communicate why this program is better. And then we came along and we showed that for every 1 pound of grass-fed regenerative beef that was produced, that it actually pulled down and removed 3.5 pounds of carbon from the environment. And so Beyond Meat saying, we're less bad. This is the direction we should go. This is the future. This is how we're going to save humanity and save the planet Earth. And then now we can say, well, actually, for every grass-fed regenerative beef burger you eat, you're offsetting the climate emissions, the carbon emissions from like 3 Beyond Meat burgers, which is kind of a fun way to think about like fighting climate change, sequestering carbon, and eating the most nutrient dense food on the planet.
I think it's such an important distinction that you made, that it's not necessarily the animals themselves that are causing nor preventing climate issues. It's actually the system in which regenerative animals are able to thrive, the conditions that you create that allow them to thrive and that invite all the other beautiful species and animals in, that create all the green plants that sequester the carbon and do all the things that we want to do to cover this planet with healthy plants and soil again in order to get this climate crisis down. So it's really the changing the relationship to our world, our soil, changing our methods entirely in terms of how we farm that's going to protect the climate, not eating less beef or even eating grass-fed beef, period. We just have to make a true change in the methods that we're using, period. Absolutely. And carbon, like I also want to be clear that carbon is not the villain. Carbon is misunderstood. You are carbon. I am a carbon-based being. All the trees, all the grass, all the bison on this planet are derived from carbon. And so the problem is that we have an imbalance in carbon. Carbon in a healthy functioning ecosystem is cycled through the soil. That's where it belongs. But when we factory farm, we release carbon from the soil and it goes up into the atmosphere. And so that imbalance exists. And so even one way to think about carbon now, it's like if carbon is the currency, carbon is the potential for life to be created down on Earth, we have more carbon than any ever given point in time in the atmosphere waiting. It's ripe for this particle state shift back into green growing plants, back into animals. But it really is like the plant specifically that is the super highway for sequestering carbon through photosynthesis. Like we learned this in like grade school. It's like, your plant breathes in carbon dioxide, it exhales oxygen. So that carbon molecule then goes through the plant, goes into the stem, goes into the root. Some of it sloughs off into the soil. That's how carbon goes through plants. And so plants are really important, and it shouldn't be plant-based versus animal-based here, because in order for the plant to realize its fullest potential, it has to have the bite of a ruminant animal. And so that's how the whole system works. It's like plants and animals together as nature designed. It's another symptom of the separation. Now I'm thinking about it, and the way that factory farms or monocrops work is that there's one farm that's growing the corn, soy, and monocrops, and then there's a different farm, quote unquote, that's putting all of the animals in this like essentially like structure. They're not even outside grazing. They're living in a structure. And those are two separate systems, and different people do those different things instead of them just being raised together as farms should be. It's really disconnected. It's borderline loco, because you're right. Like when we design our model where everything's separated, we're constantly importing fertility and we're importing food, where we could cycle fertility and cycle food through our own system. And this is how, like indigenous people have been doing it for a long time. This is how early pioneers, like some of the early settlers, had to do it because they were subsistence farmers. They were concerned with feeding their family, preserving their own fertility. And I think going back to like this idea of we are indigenous, all of us, but we are also all colonizers. Like, so we have this like really weird kind of shadow dynamic. But when we recognize that we are from Earth, that we belong to Earth, we take care of the Earth more. And it's like if you're like staying at an Airbnb or something, and you kind of like are a little bit like not as tidy, wear your shoes inside, you have mud all over your shoes, like dog poop, who cares? That's not my house. But if it's your house, like you take care, you clean, you like keep it really tidy and lovely. And so that's the relationship that we need to reform with the earth. And that is the relationship that our indigenous ancestors had. They belonged to it. It was their home. They had ownership in it. And because of that lack of separation, there was care, there was love, there was synergy, there was mutualism, because we depended on one another. Wow, that was really beautiful. All right, I got 2 final questions for you. One is, I just want to talk to you about topsoil quickly, because it's something that 2 guests have mentioned on the season so far. I talked about topsoil with Zach Bush. I talked about topsoil with my friend Courtney. And you mentioned earlier at the top of the show something about not using till methods in farming. And I also learned about the statistic that I think you had somewhere on the Force of Nature website. In 2014, the UN estimated that we may have only 60 harvests left before the world's topsoil is depleted. So what does this mean? What's the importance of topsoil? And how are we depleting it?
Sure. Topsoil is it's like the skin of the earth. It is where the majority of our fertility exists. So as you go deeper into the sublayers of soil, there's not as many roots. So like green growing plants, cycling carbon, drawing up minerals. And so you have this really important layer of fertility that is the crust of the earth. When you leave that layer exposed, when you get rain events, when you get wind events, it erodes. It runs, typically it finds its way into a closest stream, which then finds its way into the closest river, which then eventually always will end up in the Gulf or like some ocean body. And that's why we have dead zones in oceans, because topsoil and industrial agriculture is soaked with pesticides, herbicides, all types of biocides. And so the way that you have exposed topsoil that's non-protective, that is predisposed to erosion, is through tilling. So removing all the green growing plants, or through overgrazing. And that's one of the principles that we're talking about with regenerative agriculture. It's like you always armor the soil. You always have a green growing plant. You always have roots in the ground that create that stability, because that is our most precious, most vital natural resource. When we lose our topsoil, our food will no longer have innate living nutrition in it. We will only be able to produce food with inputs. And so again, back to like, that's the worst case scenario. And then like to shed light on the positive potential, we already talked about Mother Nature's forgiveness, her capacity for forgiveness. It was not long ago, I think probably still in industrial agricultural colleges, they are teaching that it takes 500 years for nature to rebuild 1 inch of topsoil, which, by the way, you can lose 5, 6, 7 inches of topsoil in one rain event. So in one day. So like this is like the ratios don't work out very favorably. You need to protect what's there. But we used to believe that it took 500 years to build 1 inch of topsoil. But pioneers in the regenerative agriculture space, people that have been doing this for 20, 30 years, like Ray Archuleta, Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, these guys are like the giants that we are standing on their shoulders today. They've been able to build 5, 6, 7 inches of topsoil in their 30 years. And so that is like shatters this idea that it takes 500 years in a natural degraded system. But now what can humans do with our innate intention to be good? How can we accelerate the restoration and the rebuilding and the healing of that very valuable resource?
What can we do? What would you say are some actionable steps people should walk away from this episode with, besides supporting regenerative meat and shopping for their meat from Force of Nature? What else can we do?
I think in general, we have a problem as a global civilization in which, again, we're just so focused on the external, and maybe we feel empty spiritually or something internally that we're not addressing. And I think that results in a lot of consumerism, which consumerism is extractive. And so it's one thing to say, I'm going to be regenerative tomorrow. I'm going to like eat this food that heals Mother Earth. But then at the same time, like trying to keep up with the Jones, like your neighbor, like this idea that I have to have the newest iPhone, I have to have the newest, highest grade car, like I have to purchase more clothes. I think we need to be okay with doing less. And I think instead of focusing and shifting all that energy expenditure on consuming, which is extractive, we can divert that more to inner growth, spiritual development, something that makes you feel satisfied or satiated, to where you don't have that impulse to pick up your phone, look at your screen, shop all the time. And I think when we do that, we're going to recognize that like the beauty and the happiness that we're seeking was within us this whole time. But just like what we're talking about with ecosystems, we have to foster it. We have to care for it. We have to create those environmental conditions for it to express itself.
I love that so much. And I notice within myself that I'm consuming when I'm not connecting. I'm replacing connection with consumption. And connection is the answer. Diversifying your network, going out, meeting a person, talking to someone on the street, making conversation with folks, asking someone, how can I help you? What can I do for you today? Do you want to cook a meal together? That's such a beautiful answer to the question, how can we be better stewards to the land and the earth?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. So I want people to understand, of course, your mission at Force of Nature. And I want people to be able to leave this episode feeling really comfortable getting their meat from you guys. So I just want you to talk a little bit more about how you vet the other purveyors of bison and ruminants and beef and all of that besides yourself, and how you make sure that you're getting it from the best sources. And I'd also love for you to talk a bit about the wild boar and how you are utilizing a naturally overgrown population to help feed people.
Yeah, that's cool. These are fun topics. So with Force of Nature, we have an internal document that's called a Land Steward Index, and we have a sustainability team that connects with our suppliers on a regular basis. We have monthly supplier calls where we're checking in with these various families, these various organizations that are accelerating the regenerative movement. We take a position that this is a global revolution. So we think this is bigger than the United States. We think we're in a global crisis, and it requires a global awakening and a global movement. And so some of our suppliers are in Australia, New Zealand. We have suppliers in the United States. I mean, we want to build this. We want to normalize this at a global level. And so every supplier that we partner with, we've been out to their land. Many of them are verified regenerative. And so that means that we work with the Savory Institute, which is a third party that produces empirical outcomes-based data to show that the water cycle is improving, the nutrient cycle is improving, ground cover is increasing, carbon is being sequestered, so that instead of, saying this is a prescriptive concept to land management, we can say, where's the proof? Where's the outcomes? Where's the data that our suppliers are doing the right thing? We're not just talking the talk, but we're actually walking the walk. And so that's really unique and different from Force of Nature. And then the other really cool part about the wild boar story is, this is mind-blowing to me because just in its most simplest form, pigs are not native to North America. There was never a pig that was native to this land. Pigs were brought over from Europe by, I think the first pigs were brought over by the Spanish, in the 1600s. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, domesticated pigs are wild. So you can take a farmed pig in your electric fence that's your best bud that you feed and you pet. And if that pig escapes the net fencing, within 2 weeks, it has physiological changes that you would never recognize it as your own pig. They grow massive tusks, they rewild, their hair changes, their skin becomes thicker, they just turn into these amazing, resilient wild animals. And so once they leave that domesticated environment, they go wild. And pigs are some of the most prolific breeders you will ever meet, where a single sow can have 3 litters a year. Each litter could have up to 12 piglets. And so it's in the blink of an eye, in 1 year, one female pig can have over 30 offspring. And then what happens when those offspring are at maturity or finishing or breeding age, which happens really quickly. It's in the blink of an eye, one mother could have thousands of children and grandchildren. So the wild boar population, we've removed our apex predators from the landscape. And so there's no natural checks and balances. If they're not native to our land, but if we still had mountain lions and packs of wolves in place, they would be getting hammered. That would be the preferred food source. And so what's happened is we have this lack of balance, and pigs are now causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, specifically to agricultural communities annually. They go into big fields of monocultures, and in a night they can tear up 100 acres. Absolutely decimate, ruin a farmer's cash crop.
This is the pigs that have become wild boars?
Yes. And there are millions of them. Over 100 million wild pigs in North America. They're in every single state. They're in every single county in the United States. And so it's like we have this food resource, which is also a problem, but we could turn that problem and feed a growing population. And so we're solving this invasive species detrimental impact on our environment, and we're also getting really nutrient dense meat from an animal that has tremendous amount of life energy, life force.
I love the life energy piece. It's my old acupuncturist used to say, whenever you're choosing carrots or like root vegetables, to always pick the one that grows really weird and funky and has a weird shape, because it has a lot more life force and chi. And it kind of sounds like these wild, crazy pigs who are all of a sudden sprouting tusks and being menaces have a lot of that chi that we need to rebuild our chi.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If you want to have a lot of babies and be super fertile, I mean, eat a wild pig, because whatever reproductive potential she has in her, she will pass that along. And it is powerful medicine.
Wow. You know, my husband's family is so fertile, and they eat a lot. They're Puerto Rican, so they eat a lot of pork, like base dishes. And so they could just take it a notch up by eating the wild boar. And I love that you guys are using what's already abundant. You are actually being environmentally friendly by utilizing this overgrown population, just like in herbalism, where we say use what is local to you. Don't import a plant from China unless it's really indicated for you and you need it medically. But many times you can utilize a species of plant that's growing as a weed over abundantly in your backyard for the same reason that you'd order a superfood from Brazil.
Love it. You're so right. And the counter, like, if we don't eat these animals, there's still a problem. And the other alternatives, like what people are proposing, is to poison them. There's an entire economy in Texas where people come from all over the world to get into helicopters, hang out of the windows with military assault rifles, machine guns, and shoot these living organisms. And then they leave their bodies in the field to decompose or for a vulture to eat. And so that's a desecration of a gift, and it's not utilizing that resource. It's not honoring a sentient being. And so they are a problem, but they still have sentience. We can still have compassion for them, and we can still use them in a way that feeds and nourishes, our communities. And so ultimately, that's why we sell wild boar. It's like our best case solution to a pretty innate problem that we're dealing with here in Texas and the rest of the country.
Yeah, I just love you guys. I love your wild boar. We make bolognese with your wild boar. It's absolutely delicious. And we love the fact that you have these ancestral blends that have not just muscle meat, but organs as well, heart and liver. And if people are looking for a really easy way to incorporate more nutrient density, things like retinol, true form vitamin A into their diets, you guys make it so easy to do that, where you don't have to separately buy liver and figure out a way to hide it in your food.
That's my favorite product, the ancestral blends all day long. And I just think that it is the most flavorful ground beef or ground bison you'll ever eat. And, it's like, we have evolved as a species to recognize flavor as a feedback loop for nutrition. And so, of course it tastes good, because it has all those vitamins and minerals that you get from the superfoods that are organs, which, heart and liver in this product.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have made a commitment this year to really pay attention to who is growing my food. So I'm doing my weekly farmers market shop religiously and just eating the veggies I can find there. I started shopping on this website called Foodrocracy, where they have staples that you'd buy, like white rice or chickpeas, but they are from specific farms that tell you how they're giving back to the soil and are often heirloom species of those beans and whatnot. So I started ordering my dry goods there, and I'm ordering my meat from Force of Nature. So I hope everyone does the same. That's my goal with this podcast season, is to connect people with the right practitioners that can help them, and also to connect them with the right folks that they can purchase their goods from and feed their families in the right way.
You're a champion. Thank you so much, Olivia, for doing that and singing these. It's like you're singing light. You're singing a beautiful future that we're reimagining, and using your voice and your own knowledge to help spread that message of hope. So really appreciate you.
It's such an honor. Thank you for everything that you're doing and the fact that you've made this into a viable business for so many people who are trying to grow food and make a living the right way. So it's just amazing. And please tell us where we can find you and how we can shop Force of Nature meats.
Yeah. Okay. Head over to forceofnature.com. We ship everywhere in the lower 48 states, and we have an amazing assortment of meat. So I think that's probably the best place to go. But we also have like 4,000 different retail points now. And so we have a product locator page on our website, and you can type in your zip code and find out what grocery stores carry our products. And then, go nourish yourself and feel the difference.
I love that. And I'll put a link to my favorite products below from you guys, like the ancestral blend with the liver and all that good stuff.
I love it. Well, thank you.
Thanks so much, Taylor. You're the best.
You're the best.
Wasn't that great?